You can access the entire episode now on our website, forbiddenknowledge.news, Rokfin, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. You said that Babylonian, the Sumerian civilizations were the first civilizations. Could it be possible that there were older civilizations that had some sort of been subjected to a major cataclysm that have been wiped out before that?
Well, that's the thing, is they clearly state that they were the first. Like it's very, very well stated that Eridu and the civilizations of Sumer was the first place that it all began. But the time period is huge. That's the thing we got to wrap our head around, is that in between there have been many, many other civilizations, and some that have reached, again, like Atlantis. And that's where and that the actual Sumerian, Babylonian, Akkadian region, like there's what's called an old Babylon, the Neo-Babylon, and then a later Babylon. They use the same sites over and over again all over the world. That's the problem, is that we see a recycling of the same places because the other cultures knew that they were important. They knew that at one time, and I want to break this down so people understand, this is important. Why are they building all these temples? Why are they building these specific sites? Why are they doing all this in a specific way? What my research has uncovered, and it gets into this term Nibiru, I want to clear this whole thing up. It's this understanding of, remember, a bridge between heaven and earth. We know that the Orion, three belt stars of Orion, is being mimicked in the Giza plateau with the three great pyramids, right? We know that they're mimicking the stars for an energetic purpose. The same thing is happening though across the world at Teotihuacan. This temple of the moon, the sun, and the temple of Quetzalcoatl, it's the same thing. It's aligned to the three belt stars of Orion all around the world. Like in Eridanus, with the Eridanus aligning to the pre-Diluvian cities of Sumer. We see this obsession in the ancient world with not only mapping and connecting the heaven on earth and bridging this gap, but also creating temples that were literally the bridge between heaven on earth. So they would create temples in a very specific place. Like, for instance, in the ancient world, there was an ancient city near Mosul that was basically a patron city to Enlil, and he had a temple there, the Temple of Enlil and the Temple of Nibiru. Okay, that's where the term Nibiru first came from. It came from a term called the Temple of Nibiru, and it was a temple dedicated to Enlil. And if you look up the term Nibiru, it actually is termed the crossing. What about the crossing of heaven on earth? The bridge. The bridge between the higher realms and the lower realms is the crossing. And it seems like there's an obsession with temples all around the world built for that very purpose. The purpose of these emissaries, these great demigod kings, were going there, and that was where they were meeting and communicating. Where laws were handed down, rules, where governing and advice, it was these places. And that was what their obsession was. And I want to make that clear, because as we go forward, we're going to see those themes come up over and over and over again. Okay? Does that make sense, Chris?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Now, here's Mount Ararat. It's one of, if not the most prominent mountain on Earth. It's an incredible mountain. It's like top 3 most prominent mountains on Earth. It's a massive stratified volcano that's largely dormant now, but it's so big. It's over 16,000 feet tall. It's so big that it just dominates everything as far as you can go. If you were to try to find the next largest mountain besides Mount Ararat, you have to go to the Himalayas. And why that's important is that in these descriptions, it states that this was the only land that was above water during these catastrophes. How could that happen? Not rain. Wrap your head around the idea of like crustal displacement and plates moving and massive tsunamis and tectonic shifts with water just cycling around the world because everything's being adjusted. Now, in the story though, gotta connect to it. He lands here. What happens in the Atrahasis as we continue the stories of the Atrahasis here is that he survives with his family, and Enlil and Enki come down from heaven, from the higher realms, and Enlil's furious. They had created this catastrophe. They wanted to wipe out all of humanity, and he and his bloodline sons directly genetically connected to Enki, these gifts of the Anuna, right? That's incredibly important for this, to understand that that's what these inherent gifts are within us, these telekinesis gifts and these powerful gifts as creators. It came from that. And that's why the bloodline that we're about to talk about and the archaeological evidence is so important, because it directly leads into Sumer and even Lemuria Mu, in my opinion. So in this description, Chris, he supposedly lands on there, and Enlil comes down furious. There was not supposed to be any mortal men. Mankind was not supposed to survive. That doesn't mean there weren't other humans that survived, obviously. But I think it was more like this divine bloodline wasn't supposed to survive. And what happens is, Enki says, well, I saved him because he's my bloodline, and you decided to create a catastrophe, blah, blah, blah. And ultimately, they come up with an agreement. In the death of Bilgames is another name for Gilgamesh, you find out that there was an agreement made where this king, Noah, Utnapishtim, was the last man ever given immortality, ever. That's what they state. He was the last man ever given immortality. And subsequently, he sort of disappeared from our realm. And that's such a weird thing to think about, but his sons didn't. And the reason we know that, in terms of him disappearing, is that Gilgamesh ends up meeting him on a journey. Remember? He meets him on this journey into the underworld, and he finds him in the underworld, which means, by the way, the trick in terms of immortality, you can't be a physical being here in the third realm. That's your trick. You exist internally in the underworld forever. That's what happened. He's in this other realm. Gilgamesh goes on a spiritual journey. It's not a real thing. He goes on this out-of-body journey, and he goes and he meets him on this journey, and he proceeds to tell Gilgamesh of an ancient story, right? I love this, where he tells him that Shuruppak is far older than he's ever aware of, that it's way before him, and Gilgamesh is an ancient king. But what he tells him is that basically you can't achieve immortality, and then Gilgamesh ends up going home like empty-handed. But the point of that is, we know what happens to this character. That's what's so fascinating. We know that, and we also know that Gilgamesh meets Atana, who's the first king of the new world after these catastrophes go through. It states that Kish is relowered in ancient Sumer. So there's some things going on in Sumer, but there's other things going on too. And that's where this gets interesting. Right. Now, Chris, I want to blow this whole thing open, because this is where it gets fascinating. In eastern Turkey, next to Mount Ararat, I have been doing a lot of research and doing a lot of digging to try to see if I can connect a theory I had, again, with the sons and bloodlines of that Noah character, creating an entire lost civilization that eventually led to the rise of Atlantis. Again, remember, he's a Sumerian king. His sons are ancient Sumerian bloodlines from this. So what did I discover? I believe this is what is the most cutting edge part of this, that I want to try to explain and present the fact that I don't believe anyone has ever connected this or presented it. So it's very exciting. And what happened was, I stumbled across Zernaki Tepe about 6 months ago. Zernaki Tepe is in the northern part of what's called Lake Van. Lake Van is the largest lake in Turkey, and it's one of the oldest lakes in the world. It's an ancient lake that was around way before the Ice Age in eastern Turkey, that's just west of Mount Ararat. Okay, I started getting curious about Zernaki Tepe quite a while back, because I had found, well, look, it just got discovered. They were starting to uncover it, and they were getting some interesting mysteries out of it. Some cuneiform writing and some big megalithic blocks and ancient kings lists. So I started going on this crusade around Lake Van to prove a theory I had about a lost civilization that wasn't known as the Eurasians. That's what they're, just like the Hittites are not really the civilization of Anatolia. They're a later civilization that came. These are not the Eurasian civilization. This is what's known as the Mount Ararat civilization. Brand new civilization that I believe is the second iteration of civilization here. When civilization began to uprise to another level that then led to Atlantis. And you can see that because we can follow the technological sophistication at this site. So I want to point out some information here so we can see this. Look at the names of the locations on here, because we're about to break them down and show you pictures.